evening, everyone. I'm your host, comedian, magician, Danny Whitson. But it's all tricks aside, because tonight we're turning the paranormal into the normal. Join me as we explore the gray areas of reality. We're going to talk all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and aliens, and see how it's all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and we are live. So if you're an experiencer yourself, or you're just plain nosy, be sure to send me your question and subscribe to the podcast. Now, get ready, because it's going to get deep. No, really, we're going to go way out there, because this is Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. What's happening, my paranormal junkies? Boy, we've got a show for you guys tonight, okay? Tonight, we have the Note Troll. Yes, this guy is going to teach us everything we ever wanted to know about remote viewing, all right? And not only is he into remote viewing, but he's also an intuition teacher, yes. So, a super exciting guest tonight. I can't wait to dig right into it. So, guys, let's get a big welcome for Josh Maitland.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, there's so many things, you know, your resume is super impressive. Like I said, we've got remote viewer, and also let's bring this up. Yeah, environmental engineer. He's a musician, and a teacher. He teaches intuition, teaches people how to do these things. So many things I want to cover tonight when we talk. But first, before we get any further, let's hear a little bit. Let the audience know who Josh Maitland is.
Right on. Yeah. So, you know, born and raised here in Canada. I'm up north of Toronto these days. And, you know, my interest in the world of paranormal stuff started very early. I grew up at the time when Ghostbusters was really big.
And, you know, that's another ad. Let me add this. I got to say, this was impressive, too. Okay. I love Ghostbusters, and I know most of us, all you guys watching probably love Ghostbusters, too. But let me tell you what Josh does. This is how big of a geek Josh is. Josh memorized the whole damn movie.
It was like a channeling thing, man. When I was a kid, I watched it enough times that it would come through me. You know, it just became part of my identity, I suppose. You know, I wanted to grow up and be a Ghostbuster or a wizard or, you know, whatever. And, you know, the closest thing to that I was able to find, at least in my younger days, was music. So, and, you know, we can get into the connotations of music in psychic abilities later. But, yeah, I started playing piano when I was pretty little, probably 6 or 7. And that turned into guitar when I got to high school, just because, you know, it's easier to play in a band with your friends if you're playing guitar. And you know, all the fun things that go with that. And eventually I went off to engineering school. You know, I was always following conspiracies and developments in the world of UFOs as well. You know, I also grew up watching the X-Files, Star Wars, Star Trek, all that stuff, right? So it was plugged into me pretty early, and always something I'd been fascinated about, and a little scared of at times. You know, I'd never had any UFO experiences in my youth. A couple of dreams that were, you know, maybe suspect, but nothing that really blew me away. I did have lots of lucid dreams when I was younger.
Okay, you could lucid dream when you knew how to do this when you were younger, lucid dream, because that's also something that you have to train yourself to do.
Yeah, it happened kind of on its own a bunch of times when I was younger. And I started reading about it in high school, about lucid dreaming, near-death experiences, all that kind of stuff, meditation.
Let me ask you this real quick, Josh, because like I said, first of all, there's a lot of super interesting things about you that I think the guests are really going to want to hear and enjoy. let's back up to little Josh. Josh was playing the piano. So first of all, any of y'all ever tried to play anything other than chopsticks on the freaking piano? You know that's hard. And now he's a musician. And then he goes off to engineering school. So not a dumbass. That's good. We've got that covered. All right. Because now let's be honest. You know, for people who like, we may have some listeners tonight, you know, viewers that are very familiar with remote viewing, and it doesn't seem crazy pants. It seems this is all natural. My paranormal people, you know, but then we have people coming to the channel for the first time and they're like, whoa, take it easy. You know, men that stare at goats, you know, I don't know what's happening here. What's going on? So, you were younger. We could tell you were musically talented. You're a very smart person, you know, engineering background. You've always had this interest in the paranormal, you know, which I think a lot of us, you know, myself included, as a young child. But when did you realize this is something that you could do?
So it kind of started to creep in, I would say, around 2012, and that was probably the first time I had a really paranormal kind of experience. Other than you know, I had a couple of dreams where people I knew had passed came to visit me in dreams, again in childhood. But in 2012, I graduated school. The guys in my band from engineering school, some of them had built this cottage out on an island up north, and you can still find this video online actually. But we recorded a whole album out there on solar power, and there was the lake was called Tilden Lake, and the family that lived there, our bass player at the time, you know, they kind of personified the spirit of the lake as an entity called Bill Tilden. So we wrote this song that was dedicated to Bill Tilden, and you know, we quite honestly created this song and put it down. We had the instrumentals together, but there's never any lyrics. And during the session, my one buddy Cody, he ran off into the woods for a few minutes while we were doing some guitars or whatever, and he started to jot down lyrics, you know, out in nature. And he came back with this crazy story about, you know, how Bill Tilden was this, again, we're all environmental guys, right? So Bill Tilden was rising up against the evils of humanity and sending the animals out to battle against, you know, the evil oil companies or whatever it was. And anyway, he handed me this sheet of lyrics that he just pulled down from the universe. I had never seen them before. I just grabbed it. Somebody else hit record, and I sang it. And what came out of me was just this absolute channeled. It was the exact right thing for the song. So
right you channeled what he was doing.
Yeah, like we were on the same vibe, and we'd been out there for a week and all together. You know, we were all very close friends too. So we were pretty synchronized in our energy. You know, we're a band. But just being in nature like that, you know, I think.
Now there was no psychedelics involved, or was, I mean, honestly,
not on this particular day.
Okay.
On this particular day, we you know, we kind of partied the first night as some do, but then, you know, we really got into work and got down to it, because we had about 10 or 12 songs, I can't remember, that we were trying to get down on tape that week. And so this was, I think, day 3. And as we were doing this song too, this crazy dark cloud was forming on the other side of the lake from us. And as we watched it, you know, in between breaks and stuff, it was encircling the whole lake, but there was just enough of a break in the clouds that we still had our solar power right where we were and where we were working, which we all thought was like, oh, that's kind of weird. So then this channeling vocal thing happens, and you know, I saved the file, and I'm like, all right, guys, should we give this a listen? And the moment I said that, the lights just went out. Everything was done. I was on battery backup, so I was able to save everything again, just for good measure. And I was like, well, I guess that's a sign, boys. We'll call it a day. So everybody went back up to their bunkhouses, and I stuck around and cleaned up a little bit. And within the kind of 15 minutes, 20 minutes that I was cleaning up, these clouds had moved in. And this is Northern Ontario wilderness darkness. Like, it's dark. And I got outside and I was like, oh man, I can't even see my hand in front of my face. Like, how am I going to find my way to the bunkie? I think it's this way. So I started walking in just the direction I generally knew it was in. And I see these little blue lights on the side of the trail, and I'm like, oh, they must have put some LEDs in here. So I follow the little lights. They're really faint, quite faint, but they got me to where I was going. I found my way, the couple 100 meters up to the bunkie, and I got in. I asked my bass player, "Hey man, when did you put those trail lights in?" And he just says, "What trail lights?" So I was like, "Huh, okay." Another bit of weirdness. So, we went to bed. Everybody passed out. It had been a big day. We did a lot of work. And I'm not sure when, but a little while later, the rain started from this storm. And it was absolute torrential craziness. It sounded like there was a machine gun coming down on the roof of this bunkie. And so I get up out of bed, and I sit straight up rather. And the song that we'd been working on all day was just lodged in my head immediately. And I asked my buddy Colin down on the other bunk. I'm like, "Hey man, do you have the song in your head?" It was called Rattlesnake at the time, or the Ballad of Bill Tilden. And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "I think we should go outside." And he was like, "Yeah." So we hop out of bed, we go outside, and the lightning's crashing, and we both got this song in our head. I start tapping along on the side of the building, and I notice it was a weird time signature, this song. I think it was like 11/7 or something mathy like that. And every time I got back around to the one on the beat, boom, lightning. And this kept going. I was like, I think the lightning is in time with the song in my head. And Colin said the same thing. So we just watched this unfold, and the guys in the other bunkie eventually kind of came outside. We were outside slamming on the walls, and lightning was flashing. And then these little blue orbs started showing up again. And
Oh wow.
they kind of popped out of existence out in the woods. And it was just the weirdest, coolest thing I'd ever experienced. It really felt like the spirit of that place had come to support what we were doing, or had resonated with what we had put out there, which was really cool. It was a really cool experience. It was I thought a once in a lifetime thing. And I've since had some other interesting things.
Now, this is okay. First of all, just to make sure we clear this up, there's no way the orbs that you were seeing could have been fireflies or anything like that. I don't know if you guys have fireflies in Canada, correct?
We do, but
okay.
I hadn't seen any for the rest of that time I was out there. So
Gotcha.
I don't think that's what it was. And the thing that really sends it for me was that in my time of need, in the darkness, these lights showed up and guided me to the bunkie. And it was really weird. And it did really feel like not like UFOs or aliens per se, but certainly nature spirits. Like it was a profound and enlightening experience.
I find interesting, real quick. I want to say real quick, with you being an engineer, I've met a lot of over the years. I'm a professional magician, so when I do my shows, sometimes there's an engineer in the audience, and they'll come up afterwards, and they have thought everything through. And they'll have this crazy explanation of how I did something, even though, yeah, it's interesting. That would work, but you're wrong. But that would work. So the thing I love about you is you've got this engineer brain. So there had to have been some time to where you were, but your mind's also open. Basically, you're a problem solver, and these are the explanations that you've given yourself. So that's why I find that even more credible on your side. We've got a question right here from our main private UFO paranormal investigator, Ryan Stacy, right here from the Tesla Network here. He's got a question. Did you know it is common that paranormal experiences and music interconnect, drawing from the ether.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got Grant Cameron's book. I think it's called "Music and the Paranormal" or "The Paranormal World of Music," sitting here in my book pile. Actually, yeah, that's super true, and I do have a theory behind that. I can share it with you now if you want.
Absolutely, let's roll
Okay,
it.
so and I'm going to get into quantum physics land a little
Oh,
bit
I
here
love that
too.
stuff, dude. I love it.
Okay, so my general theory of reality, I guess you could say, is that the universe itself is a song. You know, the root note being love. You know, that core vibration, that creative energy of the universe that we see in nature, that we see in music or any kind of creative process, right? Um, and so again, like I felt very compelled to play music from a young age, and it's always been a part of my life. And you know, my intention with music was, you know, I want to do magic, man. Like not stage magic per se. I don't have the dexterity for that, but I can slap a bass all day long with no problem.
Slap at a
Um,
bass.
but yeah, so I think the connection between music and the paranormal is just that, you know, at a quantum physical level, everything is just vibrating energy with information associated with it. So and you know, that information may be you know, that this is made of paper, or that, you know, this is a can, or you know, this pen is black and it's located at this particular place in time. But you know, everything has information associated with it, and at a fundamental level, everything solid, or even, you know, less material things like thoughts and emotions, all of that is vibration.
Yes.
And yeah, music is just vibration. It's sort of I think one of the coolest things you can do to connect with the universe. You know, when I'm up on stage playing, that's kind of the most tapped in ever that I am. Remote viewing as well. It's I've noticed a lot of correlation actually when I moved into remote viewing. So I guess I can get back to my story here. After that experience in 2012, I kept working as a recording engineer, civil engineer, environmental engineer, and you know, just playing with new bands, and I didn't really explore the paranormal too much for a while after that, other than, you know, keeping up with whatever was happening in UFO news and things like that. And then I think it was 2017. I went to make a course in my studio. I had a buddy from Chicago come up. We booked the weekend off. We booked a film crew. You know, it was this big exciting thing. We had a band from London come up, London, Ontario, that is. And yeah, we were going to just basically shoot the process of recording a song, teach people how to do that. And on the very first night of that session, it was about 9 p.m. and I had this really strong feeling that I needed to go home and check on my dog. It hit me like a brick, and I looked at the time and it was like, oh, it's 8 o'clock. Yeah, I really need to go check on the dog. Like they've been alone for a while, and it was just this crazy thing. So you know, the other guys stuck around the studio for a bit. They were going to do a couple other things, and I headed home. You know, had to feed them and whatever. And as I got, you know, I'm about 20 minutes away from my studio, so I got about 10 minutes out from home, and that feeling just got really urgent. So I busted it home and I walked in the door and immediately just felt like something was off. And I found my dog, the older of the two, a golden retriever. He was on the floor, lying there, very ill, not doing good at all. I managed to get him outside, and unfortunately he passed. But that premonition got me home in time to say goodbye, which I'm very grateful for, as sad as that was. And as you can imagine, it completely derailed my project for that week. But yeah, so that was a really crazy experience for me as well, certainly emotionally, but it kind of opened my eyes again to this whole world of psychic ability and premonitions and things like that. So
Well,
again,
when you go back, because a lot of people you hear a lot of people tell stories like that. They've got this feeling, something, and something they love, something that close to them, something's going on.
Yeah.
And, I think there most definitely something is, I think a lot of people experience that or have at least one time in their life had some type of experience like you had with your dog.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on the same note that I think a lot of our thoughts, a lot of things are vibrations that are out there. Like you hear people, say positive things, have positive thoughts. And I know the cliche and how corny, you hear it all the time, but I think there's something real to that.
It's so true. There really is a lot to it because your subconscious mind picks up everything, like everything that you see, smell, taste, any sensory stuff that's going on in your vicinity. Your subconscious is aware of it, but it's screening out, it's filtering out all kinds of crap. Because if you were, again, we mentioned psychedelics a little while ago, but when you're taking something like that, it sort of peels the filters back, and you're experiencing more of that wider reality, right? And you can only handle so much of that at a time with your own conscious awareness.
Josh, do you think, like I've heard people say that our consciousness is actually we're a satellite?
Yeah, I think it is a lot like that. I think we're capable of receiving any of this information and energy, or at least receiving sort of resonance with that. So again, like an antenna. So if you're, we'll use remote viewing as an example. In remote viewing, you are connecting to a target, and for it to technically be remote viewing, you have to be blind to said target. So there's usually a random number associated with the target, whether you task it to yourself or you get it from somebody else. That number is your target. You don't know what it is, but you can intentionally connect to whatever that number represents, and that's how you start your remote viewing session. You write the number, you connect by drawing a little ideogram on your page, and then you start to let that sensory information resonate. And it is really, I think, a lot like that, where you're receiving that information. And so in the case of my dog, I imagine you've probably had the experience where you think of somebody and then you get a phone call or a text from them. Like everybody's had that, right?
Absolutely.
That's another example of what's called spontaneous psi, PSI. It's psychic connection, non-local perception to something, usually something that has a lot of emotional resonance. So again, if it's somebody you love calling you, or your dog is sick, or whatever it is, those spontaneous moments of psi are essentially your subconscious, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, basically telling you, hey, something's up, pay attention. And it honestly, I've had other incidents where I decided to stop for a break on the highway, and then 10 minutes later, we pass an accident that we probably would have been in if we hadn't stopped, and things like that. It's that spontaneous psi is since I've started doing remote viewing, I have a lot more of that, I find.
Now I've heard stories. I've heard stories where people tell, just like how you mentioned, like the car wreck story. Like I was driving down the road and something told me to move over in this other lane. Just do it now.
100%.
And they do this, and then they avoid a terrible accident. Something happened. And now, and sometimes people associate this with paranormal, past loved one, someone trying to protect them. Or it could be in a situation, it could be somebody 100 miles away, 200 miles away. What's your thoughts on people that's had those kind of experiences? Do you think it's maybe a past loved one that can somehow still? Because also I want to clear this up too. I'm a firm believer that our loved ones who have passed, moved to the other side, the other realm, wherever they go, can still communicate with us through our satellite, through our antenna.
Yep. I would agree with you 100% on that. I've had some experiences like that myself. Um, and it may very well be like we all, I think outside of, this realm that we're in, uh, and this isn't coming from me. This is stuff I've read and heard from others more so. But linear time doesn't necessarily apply in these other realms, right? So, but the energies and information and resonant, spirits or entities in those realms can interact with us at any given time. So I think there's probably lots of cases where it probably is protection like that. Um, it's in either case, either way, I think it's your intuition kicking in when that happens. But intuition is basically your gateway to any of that information and any of those entities and any of those spirits. Like it's through your intuitional faculties that kind of stuff can communicate with you. And kind of the more you practice opening that stuff up, the better it's going to work for you. And it's not just crazy stuff like remote viewing, which is kind of like, the strength training of psychic capacity in my opinion. But any creative activity, I think music, for example, kind of works those same muscles, those intuitional muscles. Anything that puts you in flow state and kind of gets you operating your creative faculties. And anytime you're creating, you're essentially channeling that root creative energy of the universe. I think
I totally
that's
agree.
my own opinion. But yeah, so it's your intuitional gateways are I don't know, are you familiar with the Institute of Heart Math at all?
No. If you can, tell me about that.
They're sort of a research group that's kind of looked into a lot of this stuff. They've tested folks with psychic abilities. Another one is the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which was founded by Edgar Mitchell, former astronaut, RIP. And they have a lot of great scientists that explore the scientific nature of channeling and remote viewing and non-lethal perception.
It's always been a touchy thing, because people have treated it like a pseudoscience type of stuff or this or that, and which to me I think is really dumb for someone not to take it serious, because I mean it's very well a rational thing. I mean our minds do so much already, and there's so many things like you talk about the creative side, like when you write music and you put this out there and then it's out in the universe, that's affecting other people's energy, other people's thoughts, other people's moods.
100%.
And you could take something as a negative mood and you talk about the vibrations, like the butterfly effect, how that affect the entire world.
Yeah. And I think that's what creativity is. It's like it's this energy that you can channel, and just by putting it out there and taking that action, you can affect things, and maybe we don't see what those effects are, like the butterfly effect, right? Like,
yeah. Well, I want to let me do this because I know we did move around a little bit, but I want to go back to the dog story real quick here.
Yeah.
That was kind of like was that your, because sometimes, dude, you got to be honest, man. It's like, I'm thinking of spaghetti and now I just sit down in a big plate of spaghetti. What's happening? That would blow your mind. You know what I mean? So when you got home and discovered that your dog needed you, that had to blow your mind a little bit.
Big time. Yeah. And I needed a day to recover before we could even really get back to work. And my wife was on a road trip, so it was rough. But anyways, like that did kind of kick some things off. It got me thinking again about this whole thing. And honestly, at that point in life, I was partying a lot too. I wasn't very healthy. It was a bit of a wake up call in a lot of ways, as these kind of experiences with something beyond ourselves and bigger than ourselves can do to you. But again, it was another kind of 2 years, 2019, 2020, when all the lockdowns happened. That's when it really started to kick off for me. because I quit drinking at that point, 95%, we'll say. And, I did a lot of exercise, got myself in shape. I was working from home part-time because the economy was collapsing and all this stuff. And, it gave me a lot of time to go down rabbit holes.
You know what? That's kind of funny, because what better time to learn remote viewing than during the damn lockdown?
That's right. I like to think that I'm kind of, me in the future is sending me all the instructions for the right timing to do all this stuff. I'm a big believer in retrocausality, because I've seen it in action in my own life a few times, and it's a useful thing to know about and use. That's really the basis of remote viewing, to a degree, or at least that's what a lot of people theorize. So,
this was a big spark, though, that you're like, wow, I experienced something crazy. Yeah. I've got to learn more about this. I've got to.
Yeah, and I got 2017 was also the year that the Tic Tac and the gimbal video and all that stuff came out. So I started following that stuff all again, and really, I've always felt that I was going to be, it was going to be in our lifetime that we see disclosure, and certainly right now it's looking pretty good.
Whenever, what's so crazy about right now is we've never in the history of our planet been this close. I mean, right now, yeah. Congressmen are talking about this, Congress, and it's just it's something that has been taken seriously. Finally, there's people who are taking this seriously, who have a platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's an interesting time to be alive. We may
100%.
We may learn some things about ourselves that we never knew, and that's what I'm hoping I get to witness.
Yeah,
now with you, so back to the the lights that you saw. You don't necessarily think that was. I mean, you think there was like and I use the word paranormal, but
yeah,
in a lot of ways, paranormal is the normal. But it's just a word that I like to use to describe something unique, something special.
I think it was an intelligent energy of some kind.
Okay.
That certainly not human, but I think it was of nature.
But not necessarily UFOs. Not nothing.
Not anything I would say interplanetary. And certainly, no physical. We didn't see any physical craft or anything. Just these little orbs that would blip in and out of existence in between. You'd have a lightning flash, and then everything would brighten up, and you'd see the whole forest, and then it's dark again, but you see these little orbs kind of blipping. And
there was no trees. No psychedelics, no DMT, nothing.
No. This was sober day, and we had gone to sleep and woke up. Now we had just woken up from sleep, so it's quite possible we were kind of in a liminal state, where I find that that's kind of a state of mind where you can experience things sort of a little bit more in depth. So the other orb experience I had was, I've had a few now, but one of the other ones I've had was after being into remote viewing for quite some time, probably 2 years or so. And I decided to try out the CE5 protocol. Just essentially, not, I didn't sign up for the app or anything, but I kind of got the gist that it's, you meditate with the intention of connecting with benevolent, non-human intelligence.
The
right?
CE5 protocol.
That's the Stephen Greer thing. His contacting non-human intelligence with meditation thing. Being a remote viewer and a meditator, I just I like walking meditations. I like to walk in the woods with my current dog, and kind of spin the wheels and
that's awesome, dude. I bet
that's my favorite form of meditation.
Bet that is okay. let me say some quick things real quick. First of all, I'm not very familiar with meditation. I did it one time. Well, I mean, I've tried and played around with stuff because to kind of, keep anxiety down. It's a healthy thing to do. I'm 100% believer in the benefits of it. But I will tell you this is why another reason when you're talking about what you guys experienced, out in the woods there, I'll never forget. I was doing meditation one time. I was in my room, home alone, practicing this, and I started to have an out of body experience, almost like just like how you would like on psychedelics, where you kind of let go of yourself and you're not in control. You know what I mean? That feeling.
Yeah.
That first, it's scary. It's
weird.
It's a little scary at first to let go of the safety net, the raft, And I remember getting so deep in that state and letting go. And then I was like, holy shit. And I came back, And I snapped out of it and I was back here. I was like, holy hell, that was like I was on some type of psychedelic, but I was just so deep in a trance on my own.
Yeah.
So I think it's completely possible, dead sober, to have those experiences. Absolutely. But now you said walking meditation. Now, first of all, let's talk about some quick health benefits to that, because you're out in nature, you're moving around, but you're meditating at the same time.
Yeah. So it's meditation. There's kind of the classic sort of what I would call passive meditation, where you're trying to, not let the thoughts take you out of focusing on your breath or your heartbeat or whatever it is. And then there's active meditation, which is, you're getting your brain into the same sort of frequency band, which is, usually like an alpha state. If you're drinking coffee, working, you're in a beta state. If you're watching TV, you're in alpha. If you're in a deep trance kind of meditation, you're down in theta. These are all just different frequency bands of your the frequency of your brain waves, essentially how close together those pulses are. And when you're in those lower frequencies of theta or delta is what you're in when you're in a deep sleep. That's down around 4 hertz.
Right here. My name is Ray has a little he's question here. He says, isn't remote viewing just your imagination at work?
So the thing with imagination is you've got, with remote viewing, you're connecting to a target and you're trying to get into a meditative state by following these different parts of the process. You're trying to keep your right brain and your left brain kind of segregated. Your right brain is your creative brain. Your left brain is your logical brain. Yes. And your imagination is coming from the right brain for sure. And if your right brain, if you're jotting down your data in your session, you're trying to make sure that it's not imagination. That's something you have to fight against the whole time, actually. And fight is probably the wrong word, because the more you try to fight it, the worse it's going to be. It's really just better to relax and kind of let it flow and approach it all from a place of curiosity. So imagination can derail your remote viewing session, actually, and part of the art of it, I think, is getting to a place where you can actively discern between what is data and what is imagination.
How do you tell, though? How do you figure that out?
So the way you do it, remote viewing was designed by the military, right? So back to my story, the thing that really pulled me into this world during the 2020 lockdown was finding this documentary, Third Eye Spies. I highly recommend that to anybody who's interested in the history of remote viewing. I'm not a history buff. I know.
Do you know where is it streaming? Is it?
It's on Amazon for sure. It was on YouTube. It might still be. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it's
Third Eye Spies.
Third Eye Spies. Yeah, it's straight from the physicist Russell Targ, who helped invent the laser, and later went on to help invent remote viewing.
Nice. Very credible, smart people here, folks.
Totally. And Hal Puthoff, who's another who still does a lot of work for the U.S. government. He's been I think in the background doing a lot of stuff towards disclosure. He put out a paper on the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis last year, I think I saw. But the two of those guys and an artist by the name of Ingo Swann. Ingo was also a gifted psychic. It was those three and a number of others too, who sort of really brought remote viewing into existence in the form that it is. They developed the protocols that you follow, and remote viewing is different from just general kind of psychic work. It's a very specific protocol. You're following a step-by-step method. You're recording your data in certain ways to, again, keep your left brain busy by following this structured process, so that your right brain can act as the receiver. Like you said, you're trying to receive that information, and it's coming through, and you're using your intention to sort of direct that process, but you're also keeping your left brain busy with that process of putting the data in the boxes and places where it needs to be. And you start with high level stuff. You start with, you just kind of draw like a flick of the wrist. It's called the ideogram. And essentially what that is a connection to your target. You write your target number, you do your ideogram, and boom, you've kind of opened the channel. And then from that point, you begin to look at sensory information. So you can kind of poke at your ideogram. Like I tend to think of the ideogram as like a holographic download of my session information that I'm trying, and then I'm just trying to decode that hologram the whole time. So your first step in that is to be like, okay, so what do I feel? What do I sense? What do I smell? Do I see any colors? And it's best to go through that systematically. You start with sight, and then you go on to sound, and then hearing, and are there textures that I can feel at this site? So, remote viewing is kind of a misnomer, because you're really using all of your senses ideally to get different information. So it's helpful to go through all of those senses. And then another one that you look at is sort of energy. Is there, temperature? What do I feel? Is there, some kind of energy source? Emotions then are kind of the last one that you do after the sensory information in that second stage, where how does this site make me feel? What are there any feelings at this site coming from the site itself, or anything that might be there? And it's not imagination, because you're kind of busy triggering yourself with these questions of what do I feel, what do I see, etc.
Okay, that's what I find that very interesting, because we've got these senses. We've talked about, you've heard things like the sixth sense, stuff like this. So there's a lot of senses that we're using here. I tell you, I want to come back to this because I love what we're great topic. But we've got a commercial break we need to get to real quick. After this commercial break, we're going to be right back with Josh Maitland. We're going to be talking about using our senses.
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today.
It's your business. It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
All right, we are back here with Josh Maitland. Also, the note troll. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier there, but we were talking about our other senses. That this is how you could tell the difference between imagination and the remote viewing side when you're really connecting.
Yeah. And
I find that very interesting because I always talk about we have touch, smell. There's here I know there's more senses. What is it? Taste, touch, smell, and the other senses that. But what you're talking about, it's almost like remote viewing uses all these together. There's a use for all of these.
Yeah, it's the way I see it is that and this is kind of debated, I think, in the remote viewing world, but a lot of people think you're kind of projecting out to the target. I think you're kind of more going in, through the heart portal, the heart chakra. I think that's kind of we sort of touched on heart math and stuff for a little moment there before, but the intuitive system is really your heart, your brain, and your gut. That's sort of where this stuff flows. And when you're in tune, in that kind of meditative heart space, that's when you get the best flow of information. So it's the sixth sense is a bit of a misnomer, I think, too. I think Ingo Swann once said there was something like 17 senses, because we can sense electromagnetic stuff, all kinds of weird things like that, but you know, there's that sense of being stared at, you know.
Absolutely. But you know, something else I want to add real quick is I always bring this up. Okay, now we've got sight, we've got hearing, we've got taste, we've got touch, we've got these senses that we use, that we have evolved to use.
Yeah.
Based on our environment, based on what's around us. You know, if the light didn't exist, we probably wouldn't have eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, you know, there'd be no sense, you know, no reason for it. Think about some of the things also that I always throw this out here. Think of the other things that do exist in the universe that we can't measure because we don't have the senses in order to be able to measure these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we don't know how to use the senses that we have in order to measure these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And with when you're doing remote viewing or other psychic stuff, you're kind of tapping the inner corollaries of those outer senses, I think. So for each outer sense, touch, taste, sight, smell, etc., you've got, you know, what's historically known as the clair senses. So clairvoyance would be, you know, that clear inner sight. Clairaudience is when you hear stuff, you know, inwardly and psychically. Clairgustance is when you taste it, and then there's other ones like claircognizance when you just know shit. You know, that's the coolest one actually. And then there's somatic, like clairsomatic senses, where you know you might have a feeling in your body or in a chakra or something like that, like an energy center in your body that would correlate to something. So, you know, maybe I'll be doing a remote viewing session, and you know, I do a lot of sessions. Again, it's only a remote viewing if you're blind to the target, but I'll do sessions where I'll be trying to figure out some problem that I have, and the data that I'll get is a feeling in my solar plexus or something. So it's like, oh, so this is kind of telling me maybe I have to take action on something, or in my throat, it's maybe like, oh, I need to say something, you know, and you'll it's weird, man. Like I'll feel the stuff coming up in my throat, and then the words will come out, and I'll be like, oh, interesting, and then I'll write it down. But it's a weird process, man. Like it's a very individuated process too, not unlike, you know, a musician developing their own kind of signature style. I think remote viewers kind of do the same thing. It's very much an art.
Do you think it has? Okay, from my world, okay, you know, I will stand on stage and I pretend to read someone's mind. I'm not reading their mind. It's a trick. Although I've studied cold reading, I've studied mentalism for 25 years. You know, I use it in my act. We have fun. It is a trick. I'm not reading their minds. Now, and a lot of magicians from you know, my background, a lot of them don't dismiss psychics completely altogether. The whole Uri Geller thing, they're like, oh, he's a fraud, blah, 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 blah.
He's a pretty good remote viewer, actually.
Well, absolutely. You know, I've never written Uri off. I've never met him, but I've never written it off completely. Now, I am aware there are scammers out there that take advantage of people all the time.
100%.
I'll never forget one time after a show, I had this little old lady come up to me, and she was like, could you come back to my place and hypnotize me? I've lost jewelry and I need to find it. And I said, no, don't ever go up to a total stranger and do that ever again.
Yeah, right. Wow.
But, but I mean, you know, but here's the thing, though. I do think, like I said, there are some very authentic, genuine people out there. But just like in every single thing, there is shysters. There are flim-flam scams. And maybe people who claim to have these abilities, but they just want to get into your pockets.
Yeah.
But the thing I like about you, Josh, once again, and this is the other thing, man, I think there needs to be more people like you heard on this topic, because, I mean, like I said, you bring science to it. You bring, you know, look, this guy was smart. This guy was smart. Here's the, you know what you're talking about. You're just not.
I came in as a skeptic, honestly.
Yeah.
I watched Third Eye Spies, and I was fascinated, you know, just seeing these scientists talk about this process that they developed, and they go through and they talk about, you know, how the military used it to spy on the Russians, and they give examples of some of the stuff they found. Like, it's all declassified now, so it's anybody can look this up. But the Stargate project was, I believe, the first one. Again, I'm not the guy to talk to about remote viewing history. Anyone who's really interested in that, there's a guy named Daz Smith who has a great website. He's a world-class remote viewer. He's got lots of great stuff on the history of it on his website, which is remoteviewed.com with a D. Yeah, just even if you just Google Daz Smith remote viewing, you'll find him. But yeah, the history of it's fascinating, and just the idea that these guys took a scientific approach to psychic abilities and got a bunch of money to develop a program, and then they used it and they had all kinds of success. It was fascinating. And as the credits rolled on that documentary, I heard a voice in my head say, Google remote viewing courses. And it was loud as hell. It was my own voice in my head. It was the weirdest thing. So I was like, okay, well, there's another weird experience to add to the pile. I guess I'm going to check this out. And I found an online course from one of the kind of a second generation from the military program guy, and took his course. I ended up taking actually his intro course and then the intermediate and advanced, and I blasted through all of it. I loved it. It was fascinating because the first target I tried, it was like a roller coaster was the target. I had no idea what it was going to be, right? Like you don't know, it's blind. And I followed the process I learned in the first couple exercises of the class, and sure enough, I drew a roller coaster. I got these rails and the car and the colors, everything was on. The only thing I missed was it was actually a roller coaster that was going in through some water, and I didn't pick up the water element, which is weird because I'm a water engineer. But it was a fascinating target, and so after that success, I kept going, and I kept hitting the targets, and it was fascinating. I think I spent probably most of 2021 and 22 doing a target almost every day, or
I can
more.
see how that could be addicting.
It is.
It's like, whoa, holy hell.
It's so cool. It feels really good when you hit it too, because it's like, holy shit, I just did that. Like, it's this wild thing, and it blew my mind, and that set me down further rabbit holes. I went and I had to look up, who are the people doing this in the world, and I found a whole community of people that do remote viewing. There's a remote viewing subreddit and Discord. I did a podcast recently with some friends that are it's called the Psychic Guys podcast. It's a bunch of remote viewers and psychics that talk about their experiences doing remote viewing and psychic stuff. But yeah, it was great. So I spent that kind of 2-year period just jamming with people, on targets. Someone would set a target up, and we did one on. So there's this phenomenon where anybody that learns remote viewing pretty much tries to win the lottery with it, right? Like, why wouldn't you? And so many people, myself included, you start on the pick 3 or the pick 4 or whatever, and I will just consistently get 2 out of 3, and like I'm hit, and then that one that's off is off by exactly 1 or something like that. And it's the very first time I did it. It was I was using dowsing as opposed to remote viewing for this particular thing. But there is, I woke up in the morning, I was in that liminal state, and I was like, okay, what are my numbers? And I ended up with like 359. And this was the first time I tried it. I didn't buy a ticket, checked it later that day. Sure enough, it was 359.